Thank you everyone for joining us today. We are going to be talking about how to be in full with Walmart's On Time in Full program. And so just some housekeeping stuff before we get started. We do usually get quite a few questions in our OTIF webinars. So if you have a question, oh yay, we have a return viewer. Sorry, a little distracted. Good morning, everyone. And yes, we will be sending out a PDF on the session. So we will be sending out the slide deck as well as the recording. No need to take notes unless there's something that you really want to highlight, but we will be sending out the recording and the slide deck after this. Okay, going back to the housekeeping stuff, we do have a Q&A button down there at the bottom. Please submit your questions in early if you have them. If we're unable to get to your question, then we will be following up afterwards and making sure that we answer it there. We usually try to ask questions and make it pretty interactive as we're going through the deck, but we do also reserve about 10 to 15 minutes at the end so that we can talk about that. Perfect. We have lovely Stacy Tan joining us today. So she is our Senior Director of Retail Insights here at SupplyPike. She brings over decades worth of experience in the supplier world, working on both sides as a supplier, as a broker. She's done all of the things, and we're so lucky to have her. So today she's going to be talking about what it means to be in full, and then how you can actually find those scores. It will also be comparing shortage deductions versus in full fines. So that's a question we get a lot here at SupplyPike is like, will I get hit with a shortage deduction and also an OTIF fine if it is short? The answer is yes. Just a quick review. We'll be getting more into that. We'll also be getting into how you can identify some root causes and determining who's accountable. There's also a section inside of that determining accountability on how you can actually dispute some of these fines that you're receiving. So we'll be going over that. Like I mentioned kind of at the top, we will have about 10 minutes where we will just answer general questions and have a discussion. And if you decide that you've liked the presentation today and you're curious to learn more about SupplyPike, we will be having an optional OTIF Radar demo. So OTIF Radar is our product here at SupplyPike that helps you with your OTIF issues. So if you want to stay on, see our faces for 5 extra minutes and learn more about SupplyPike, we would love to have you. Perfect. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Stacy.
Awesome.
Who SupplyPike is.
Yeah, thanks, Melody. To those of you guys who are attending our webinar for the first time, we always love to start our webinars with a really quick introduction of who we are. As Melody mentioned earlier, we are proudly located in Northwest Arkansas, and we are actually a software company that provides solutions and tools and apps to aid suppliers in the retail world. So as you guys can imagine, starting in Northwest Arkansas, Walmart and Sam's Club for a very, very long time were our primary focus. But last year, we're really, really proud to share that we also expanded into Kroger. And this year, we will be actively expanding into Target pretty much in the next 3 or 4 months, I think, and then Amazon by the end of the year. So really, really exciting stuff for SupplyPike. But really quickly, just kind of what we do is we help our CPG partners manage relationships with their retailers, monitor the status of their business, and reduce cost and waste. And kind of how we do that is we have a full suite of apps, some of them around sales and analytics and replenishment, some of them around tackling your deductions that you receive from Walmart. And as Melody mentioned, one of them is around OTIF, which stands for Walmart's On Time and In Full program. And we help to also streamline how you can fight fines from that program. So you guys can see across the bottom of the screen a couple of the brands that we work with. We're so proud to consider them part of the SupplyPike family. And hopefully one day we will be able to add you guys to our SupplyPike family as well. So really quickly, before we get too deep into the OTIF weeds, I really wanted to level set with everyone on what OTIF is exactly. So if you guys are kind of new to Walmart or maybe new to looking after the transportation and logistics side of the Walmart business, you may have heard Walmart say OTIF before, but maybe not know exactly what it is. So it is Walmart's supplier compliance program. As you can imagine, pretty self-explanatory, but it stands for on time and in full. So essentially Walmart is saying, hey, if I order 100 cases from you to arrive by next Thursday, the expectation is that you send them 100 cases and they arrive by next Thursday. So Walmart uses this as kind of their primary KPI for supply chain success. You'll hear the buyers talk about this. You'll hear the replenishment team talk about this. And for many teams, before you even start a conversation, the first thing they're going to ask you is, what's your OTIF score? Kind of the expectation is, hey, if you're not even able to ship me on time and in full, let's not even talk about business opportunities. So very, very important for Walmart. You guys can kind of see in the middle of the screen, there are fines related to the OTIF program. So if you do not kind of hit Walmart's OTIF goals, which is 98% on time and 98% in full, you will get fined 3% of cost of goods sold on any of the non-compliant cases. So scores are done on a per case basis. So great example of that, Walmart ordered 100, you only shipped 90, for example. So, you are 8 cases out of compliance because their goal is 98, you would get fined on those 8 cases. Another interesting thing to note is that there are different measurements for on time and in full. So for today's webinar, we are going to be focusing on the in full portion. Oh, a little too fast there. So really quick, one more thing to level set for you guys. A common question we get asked a lot is, so who does OTIF affect? Do I need to be paying attention to it? So right now, OTIF scores do count for brick and mortar and e-commerce suppliers. So if you are shipping into the stores or if you're an e-com supplier, yes, you do have an OTIF score. Yes, you should be paying attention to it. Yes, you could potentially be fined for it. As of today, it does not affect Sam's Club. So if you're in Sam's Club only, no need to worry about that for now. It does not affect direct to store deliveries, direct import, Walmart International, as well as marketplace sellers. So, all right, we've kind of got a general understanding of what the OTIF program is. And like I said, we really want to focus in on what does it mean to be in full. So this one, thankfully, pretty self-explanatory. So a PO is considered to be in full if Walmart receives 100% of all ordered cases. So again, I kind of mentioned that the overall in full goal for all departments is 98%. So again, pretty easy. If they ordered 100 cases, the expectation is that you're delivering at least 98. And of course, if you can deliver all 100, that's even better. Once you fall below that 98, you're officially out of compliance with the in full metric. How you calculate the in full score, again, thankfully, pretty straightforward. Essentially, you would take a look at how many cases were ordered, and then, you take how many cases were in full divided by how many cases were ordered, multiply that by 100, and you should get your in full score. So again, you ship 98 out of 100, multiply that by 100, your in full score is 98%. So thankfully, this part of the OTIF piece, fairly easy to understand. But one thing that I do like to call out, and this sometimes trips people up a little bit, is that for the OTIF score, it actually does kind of split into two. So there is Walmart accountability and supplier accountability. So there are situations where Walmart will take accountability if your OTIF fine or if your OTIF score is less than 98%. A great example of that is if you are a collect supplier, let's say, and Walmart picks up your goods, it's their responsibility to get it to their DCs. So if they get it there late, your OTIF score will be less than 98%. However, because it was Walmart's responsibility to carry that freight, they will take accountability for it. So you won't actually be fined for that. So when you're looking at your OTIF score, you kind of need to understand where your on time and in full scores are. But within that, you also then need to break that out further and understand what is Walmart's accountability and what is your accountability. So the fines that we were talking about, that 3% of cost of goods sold, are only going to be assessed for any of your non-compliant cases. So really quickly, again, if you guys are kind of newer to the space, we always like to show you where you can actually access this information. So if you are logged into Retail Link, you're more than welcome to follow along if you want to. But basically, you should be able to access the apps tab at the very top of the screen, and then you can just type OTIF scorecard, and you should be able to see that pop up. Really quick pro tip for you guys is if there's a star, I think to the left of the OTIF scorecard, if you hit that star, it will favorite that icon for you, and then it'll always show up on the homepage, so you don't have to search for it every time. So if you are pulling up your OTIF scorecard, it should look like something on the screen that you guys see right now. And essentially where you can see your in full score is kind of the bottom half of the screen. You guys can kind of see the different business units here. So we just have a demo company up, of course, that is in home. If you guys are in consumables or food, you'll see your scores in your related columns. But essentially, it's going to give you a full case breakdown with combined accountability. And then supplier accountability is a measure of delivering the ordered cases. So a couple of other things that we want to point out, we like to point out just for basic navigation around the Retail Link OTIF app is you are also able to toggle between performance and charges. So this is pretty important. You can see your OTIF score, and then you can also see your fines associated if your OTIF score is below goal. There's some tooltips that are available if you toggle the help button on and off. You can also filter the data in a couple of different ways. So, digit level, department level, etc. And then you can also download any of the reporting that you need to from the app. One other thing that I like to point out really quickly, if you are in the charges page, so if you want to go see your fines that you've received from OTIF, there's a couple of things to point out really quickly. And Melody mentioned we'd be talking about how to fight OTIF fines. So I'll kind of give you guys just the high level right now, and we'll deep dive into it later. But essentially, you can toggle between your invoiced OTIF fines and your projected OTIF fines. So at a very, very high level, once an OTIF fine has been invoiced, so Walmart has assessed it and said, yes, we are going to go ahead and levy this charge against you, it is almost impossible to fight. 99% of the time, you're not going to be able to fight that. Where you can potentially get OTIF fines waived is if they are projected fines. So Walmart thinks, based on the current supply chain, based on what they see in the system, you may be liable for this fine. And so you need to be able to go to Walmart in that short time frame and say, actually, no, you shouldn't fine me because of ABC. So if they waive those fines, then you are good there and can move on with your life. You can also see the supplier scores. So these are your scores without Walmart's accountability. That's the key part. And these are the scores that will actually determine if a fine is issued. Okay, so wanted to hop over really quickly. Like Melody mentioned, kind of one of the questions that we get a lot as well is, hey, I have gotten a shortage deduction. Is that the same as an OTIF fine? Is it different? Can I get fined on the same PO or the same case? And so we like to really make that distinction clear for you guys. So really quickly, shortage deductions are something that originate from Walmart's accounts payable department. And basically what it means is that Walmart is withholding payment on a specific supplier invoice, or they've retracted payment for returned merchandise. So what that means is Walmart ordered 100, you invoiced for 100 because you shipped 100. Walmart will say maybe, oh, we only received 80 cases out of the 100, so they're going to short pay you. So you've invoiced them for 100, Walmart will only pay you for 80. That is considered a shortage deduction. Whether it's valid or invalid, whole other story. We've got a bunch of webinars on that, but generally that's kind of the distinction. You invoiced and they withheld. So really quick kind of pro tips for you guys is the claim number is usually the invoice number. If you need any backup information, it's going to be available in the APIS, which is the Accounts Payable app in Retail Link. As I kind of mentioned, the deduction is withheld from a check. Usually it will include some sort of deduction code and a description. So it may say something like code 24, goods billed, not shipped. And so you'll be able to kind of say, okay, they deducted me because of this particular reason. And most of the time, if you are receiving a shortage deduction, you will dispute that through a portal called APDP, which is the Accounts Payable Dispute Portal. So again, if you guys are kind of newer to the space, you may have heard of something called Direct Commerce. That is what Walmart used to use. It was a third-party app, but Walmart has since brought that in-house. And again, you would dispute any shortage deductions from APDP. Now, on the flip side, an in full fine originates from Walmart's accounts receivable department. So in this case, rather than you invoicing them and them short paying you, they will actually invoice you for the violations. So if, for example, you didn't ship in full and Walmart says, hey, I'm going to assess a $5,000 fine on you because of this OTIF problem, they will send you an invoice. So backup information is available in high radius versus APIS. So that's key to know. High radius is actually a separate third-party portal. So you do need to have access to a high radius account. We can send information about that if you guys are curious. Kind of the key part here is if you don't pay them directly, so Walmart will invoice you. If you don't pay them, they will go ahead and take it and withhold it from the check anyway. So yeah, they're going to get their money anyway. And the invoice numbers, this is kind of key if you want to be able to delineate between the two. Often they start with a 7,000 number and they'll have a division store number on the check line of 05-9000. Check lines often do not include deduction codes or description. So a lot of times you'll see something blank. So usually for us, if we see a blank description and then that 7,000 or 05-9000, we know it's, 90% of the time it's going to be an OTIF charge. And usually you'll dispute these through high radius rather than APDP. So really quickly, in case you guys are curious and you want to be able to identify this within APIS, so you'll be able to see this is a great example here. You'll see that there's a negative amount paid, and you guys can kind of see here all of the different claim codes. So these are actual shortage deductions, but in this example, there is no deduction code or description. The invoice number that starts with 7,000, and then also that division store number is 05-9000. So we've anonymized this information, but this is kind of a real example of what this will look like if you were to find it in APIS. Okay, cool. So now that we've kind of established the difference, or established what the OTIF program is, kind of what it means to be in full, and took a brief detour to talk about, hey, what is the difference between a shortage deduction and an OTIF fine? We really want to get into kind of the fun stuff, which is understanding what the root causes are if you are below kind of where you want to be, and then also determining accountability and essentially how can you work on improving your in full fines. So really quickly, as you guys can imagine, for the in full piece, again, fairly self-explanatory. So what are things that can potentially lower your scores? And basically it's, hey, if fewer cases arrived than what was ordered. So again, I'm kind of beating a dead horse at this point, but Walmart ordered 100, they say they received 80. Obviously that's going to impact your score. And kind of similarly, if no cases arrived at all. So Walmart ordered 100, you had to cancel it for some reason, inventory shortages, or you couldn't get a truck or whatever it is, then of course that is going to impact your in full score.
Hey, Stacey, really quick,
Yeah.
to just talk about the impact that in full score, why does Walmart care so much about in full? And maybe you can talk a little bit about the growth forum and the insights that you have there as well.
Yeah, that is a great question, Melody, and a great reminder too to kind of zoom out. It's really easy to get into the weeds of I need to know what my scores are. But if you kind of zoom out and think about it, at the end of the day, Walmart is a retailer and they're trying to serve their customers. So to them, if you are not in full, essentially what that means and what that translates to is you're not able to kind of satisfy their forecasted demand, and kind of going further down the line, what that means is now you don't have product on the shelf and you are losing that sale for Walmart. So for them, and Melody brings up a great point. So Walmart had a supplier growth forum, I want to say two Thursdays ago now. And essentially, if you guys have not been to that before, it's basically an all-day event where Walmart will invite usually about, I want to say 1,000 suppliers to attend. And it's kind of where they will lay out their strategic initiatives for the rest of the year. So, mini shout out, we're actually finalizing a recap right now of that. Supply Pack was able to attend. We'll be sending that out. If you guys are curious, definitely feel free to ask us for it. But one of the big initiatives that they talked about, and really it's kind of two parts, is they really, really stress the importance of being in stock and, making sure that your OTIF compliance is strong. Essentially kind of their bottom line is that, the customer is back in the stores. They're ready to shop. They want to shop however they want to shop. And, I get that. I do a lot of shopping as well. And so it's a lot of frustration if they're not able to get what they want. And in addition to that, they can potentially substitute products. So if your product isn't there, they may go to a substitute, you're going to lose that customer forever. Or kind of, zoomed out, they may just choose not to go to Walmart anymore if they have in-stock issues throughout the store. So in-stock and OTIF were stressed a lot at the Supplier Growth Forum. And another thing that I kind of wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of is Walmart introduced something called item swap, which is brand new. I've been doing this for a long time, and this is a very new concept, even for me. And essentially kind of how they introduced it was, hey, if you guys have a new flavor of product or a new style or something is trending, you don't have to wait for the line review to introduce that product, because usually that's how it goes. You have your once a year, maybe twice a year line review, and that's when your product gets reviewed and either deleted or added or goes forward or whatever it is. So they were saying, you don't have to wait for that. You can go ahead and give it to us in the middle of the year. And, if it makes sense, we'll go ahead and replace it. But kind of their not so thinly veiled threat on the other side of the coin was simultaneously, if you are not able to keep your product on the shelf, if you're not able to maintain a strong in-stock, if you are going to have inventory challenges, we can replace your item halfway through the year. We don't have to wait for a line review to replace your product as well. So that's something that, we've been sharing with a lot of the supplier partners that we work with to be aware of. In-stocks have always been important to Walmart, always. But there looks to be like renewed focus on it this year. So if you guys aren't, really keeping track of your in-stock on at least a weekly basis, if you're not looking at item store level data, if you're not checking your OTIF scores weekly, really, really, really recommend that you start looking into that, because again, I'm broken record, but it is going to be a very, very big deal for Walmart in 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacey. Yeah, just to give I really like that recap. Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to be a doomsday person, but essentially Walmart, Walmart wants to make sure that we have product on the shelf so that their customers can buy it. So in-stock and OTIF, focus in. But yeah, so as you guys are kind of looking at your in-full scores, again, there's a couple of things that, I'm not going to bore you guys and read all of this on the slide, but these are the sort of data points that you usually would want to focus in on when you're trying to determine like, where did we go wrong? And also who is responsible and what do we need to do next? So as I kind of mentioned, hey, really what can cause an in-full score to drop is if you have issues, with Walmart basically not receiving what they ordered. So there are usually kind of three main buckets as to why this can happen. And of course it's Walmart, so there's a whole bunch of other potential reasons, but usually we see it kind of fall into these three main buckets, which are cases are misreceived by Walmart. Just plain and simple, there's a lack of product, or suppliers are not using the best cancel reason code. And I'll kind of go into each of these. So cases misreceived by Walmart. Essentially kind of what the gist of that is, Walmart ordered 100, you did ship 100, but for some reason they did not receive 100 according to their system. So a couple of things that we like to point out, kind of pro tips for you guys, if you think that that's what might be going on, is consider updating the packaging so that different items are easier to distinguish when they're received by DCs. So, Walmart is doing a lot of work towards making their DCs a lot more automated, but for right now, it is still a fairly manual process. When they received goods, through the door, sometimes there is just some guy who's like scanning a barcode and like counting and going, oh yeah, that looks like 5. So we run into situations sometimes where, let's say you have the same SKU, but it's 3 different colors. But they may scan the red color and just count all of them and say, okay, yeah, we got, 10 of red, when actually it was 3 of red, 3 of blue, and 4 of yellow, for example. So a really easy way to help distinguish that is, hey, stick a red, blue, and yellow sticker on your packaging. Usually that helps them to visually distinguish the cases that they're receiving. If you are a collect supplier, so that means Walmart comes to your warehouse to pick up the goods and ships them, make sure that you are keeping signed bills of lading. This will come in handy later on when we're talking about disputing OTIF fines, but you want to be able to know that, prove to Walmart that, hey, they actually came and picked up those 100 cases. If you are prepaid, you need to make sure that you know how to access the proofs of delivery. So usually your carrier will have some sort of portal that will allow you to kind of go in, type in a PO or a tracking number, and you should be able to pull that back as well. So how you spot this particular issue, usually compare your not in full POs to your internal shipping data or shipping documents. So again, great example, if you have a BOL saying 100 cases were picked up and Walmart is saying they only received 80, hey, that's a really classic tell of Walmart is somehow misreceiving these cases, and now we can go deep dive and see what we need to do next. Another thing that happens, and this is happening to everyone, so please, you guys don't feel bad if it's happening to you as well, but lack of product. So basically, again, Walmart shipped 100, you don't have 100 to ship. So in those situations, you want to kind of make sure that you are reviewing the performance of your multiple pickup locations. So is Walmart pulling more product out of a specific pickup location? And so, you don't have product when you need it in location A, but you have too much in location B. Basically, continue to keep an eye on that. A really important thing is you want to closely review your Walmart forecasts. So this is important because Walmart has something called a GRS forecast. It stands for Global Replenishment System. And that is essentially their POS demand forecast. So that is what they expect our customers will buy from the Walmart stores. They utilize that GRS forecast and kind of go a step up and say, okay, we expect customers are going to buy 500 units 2 weeks from now. So based on that, we are going to order maybe 525 units to make sure we have enough to cover in case there's an unexpected spike in demand. So you guys will probably see something called a supply plan. And if you have not yet, it is something you can pull out of Retail Link using the DSS app. And the supply plan is what Walmart expects to order from you. So the supply plan is derived from the GRS forecast. It's important to kind of pay attention to both because you want to make sure that they're kind of aligned, right? So if, for example, you guys are expected to sell 500 units and Walmart only orders 50, I would maybe say, oh, hold on, that doesn't seem like it's going to be enough to cover demand based on what we have at the stores. So always be paying attention to that. If not, that is how you can very quickly kind of be upside down when it comes to inventory. If you're not looking at your forecast, you're not looking at your supply plan, bam, suddenly Walmart orders 3,000 units that you weren't ready for. And now you're just going to be out of product for the next 10 weeks, waiting for product to arrive from your factory. So always better to kind of plan ahead, understand what's coming down the pike, because once you know, then you can start to plan your inventory accordingly. So kind of another tip with that is, of course, work with your manufacturers to identify production issues. So this is a little bit harder. It's kind of easy for us to say, but obviously, as you guys know, it's getting really hard to get raw materials. It's getting really hard to get containers. It's getting really hard to get trucks. But do what you can, plan as far ahead in advance as you can to try and mitigate some of these issues. For example, we work with teams that are actually planning production 18 months out. So it used to be kind of like a 6-month cycle. Then with COVID, it became a 12-month cycle. And now we're working with teams that are looking at what they expect to sell and locking in contracts for like the back half of 2023, which is kind of crazy. And then always you can consider alternative manufacturers. So a great example of this, and Melody and I talked about this last week, but we're starting to see a lot of factories in China close because of the COVID lockdowns. I think like 50 million Chinese population are in lockdown right now. And so no one can work. And so a lot of our teams are actually having to figure out how to source their same product from Vietnam or India or Bangladesh or Mexico or whatever it is. So, just make sure that you're on top of that and always paying attention to these kind of big events so that you can, again, contingency plan if something like this happens. So how you spot this, pretty easy. Basically, if you have any not in full POs with cancellation reason codes that the supplier does not have product or product availability, or if you have any cancellations without a reason code. So kind of the last big bucket is not using the best cancel reason. So if you guys are familiar with Walmart, you probably know that if you don't have product to ship, you can actually submit a cancellation, basically telling Walmart that you will not be shipping this product. Where there is a little bit of nuance is you actually have the ability to kind of pick a reason code as to why you are canceling that PO. And the pro tip here is try and use a Walmart cancel reason code whenever you can justify doing so. And that is kind of the key part, is you have to be able to justify it. So, you know, if you really don't have product and it's really because you have nothing in your warehouse, you can't be like, it's Walmart, because they will know, and you know, they will not really be happy about that. But there are certain reason codes like Walmart ordered too much, or weather, or, you know, similar situations. And actually we have a list on the next slide. And so whenever you can, try and utilize a Walmart cancel reason code, because that puts it in Walmart's accountability. And as we learned earlier, that means no fines for you. So that's pretty important. So how you can spot that is any not in full POs with cancellation reason codes assigned to supplier accountability, or unshipped POs without a reason code in which a Walmart reason could have been justified. And this will make a little bit more sense on this slide. So you guys can kind of see here, these are the different reason codes that are available and who the accountability, whose accountability it falls under. So again, wherever possible, try and use Walmart, but, you know, make sure that you can justify it. You can't just pick Walmart and hope for the best. That usually does not turn out so great. Okay, so now that we've kind of established, you know, the importance of OTIF, what it is, how you find your scores, and, you know, what is the root cause behind them, we're going to pivot really quickly into talking about, okay, now what? What do I do about that? What do I do with this information? Okay, I found out what my score is and why it's not great. What do I do? So first thing that we like to do is, number one, make sure who's accountable for it, right? You know, you should always know your data at a high level, but essentially if it falls into Walmart's bucket, don't lose too much sleep over it. You're not going to be fine about it. It's good to know in case your buyer asks, or you can have a discussion during line review season, but really you want to be paying attention to anything that falls under your bucket, because that is what you are liable for. And from there, you basically want to start kind of digging down into what are your non-compliant POs. So, hey, I know my score isn't where I want it to be. Kind of next level is, based on that, where should I be looking to figure out why my score wasn't where I wanted it to be? So you would basically need to figure it out on a PO level so that you can kind of root cause and deep dive. Essentially, you know, export the data, as you guys can imagine, review any key data points, group the information by item, carrier, DC, etc., and then confirm results. And we are going to show you guys how you can do that through the OTIF app on Retail Link. It is quite a manual process, but in case you guys ever want to get into that level of detail, this is how you would do it. So kind of on the left-hand side, you guys should see this little like list looking icon, and this is your PO details page. So you can click that to access your PO data. And then from there, you'll be able to see PO information at the line level. So really quickly, to those of you guys who are not super familiar with PO, like PO headers and PO lines, essentially, usually a PO will go one PO to one Walmart DC, so one location. But within that, if you have multiple items, you can have multiple lines within that PO. And what that means is you can have different compliance at the line level, because let's say Walmart ordered 5 products, 4 out of 5 of them you shipped complete, 1 out of the 5 you did not. Walmart will assess that OTIF score and that fine on that line level. So important to kind of understand, you know, kind of the mother PO versus the PO line. From there, you can also see the receiver, which is you can view your delivery information on the PO line. So what time did it get delivered and all of that information. You can also download the button, or download the information. So in the top right-hand corner, you see downloads the PO line level and receiver tabs into separate Excel tabs. And then this is kind of a pro tip for you guys. You'll see this kind of 3-dot kebab icon. So you can actually select the columns and the orders that you want to view the information in. So you can drag and drop them to reorder them, so on and so forth. So yeah, really quickly, kind of one thing I wanted to throw out there for you guys that's important to know is, so Walmart only stores detailed PO data for a 13-week rolling period. So from whatever week we are in today, kind of minus 12 weeks. So you have the current week plus 12 previous weeks. That is essentially all of the detailed PO data that you'll receive. So kind of when we go into the next Walmart week, you will lose that 14th week. And then when you go into the next one, you'll lose that 14th and 15th week, and so on and so forth. So it is actually another kind of pro tip for you guys. If you're not doing this already, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you are going in and kind of downloading your PO detail data every week. Because if you're not, essentially you lose it. Kind of the disadvantage of that, of course, is that you're downloading like individual files every week. And it does make it quite difficult to try and compare like different periods of time. But that's right now the only way for you to get that level of detailed information out of Retailing. So make sure that you guys are doing that if you're not doing it already. Yeah, so from there, once you've kind of identified what the problem POs are, and you kind of go, okay, I know that these POs had issues because of X, Y, Z. From there, of course, you want to make sure that you adapt accordingly. So make sure that you are training your teams internally and also externally. So we work with some teams that have 3PLs or carriers that may not have a lot of experience with Walmart. And they may not understand what Walmart's expectations are around on time, around in full, around appointment scheduling, for example. And so you need to make sure that you're communicating Walmart's guidelines internally and externally so that everyone is on the same page. And then, of course, if you ever need to change processes, change them to make sure that, you're compliant. And a lot of times, so we work very, very closely with a lot of our supplier partners and actually provide kind of one-on-one guidance after looking at their OTIF scores. And I think Melody's going to talk about this a little later on. But there's a lot of times some low-hanging fruit. Like a great example of this, and we covered this, I think, last week, is, if you receive a PO and you're a Collect supplier, you have to route it by 4 p.m. the next day. That's it. And that's it. And there are a lot of teams that don't know that, and they just kind of route them whenever, later in the week or, a few days from now, and they get hit with these massive fines when it's something that, hey, if I had just known that I needed to route it by 4 o'clock, we would have been good. So that's the sort of information that we can help you kind of deep dive into and identify and kind of call out for you. And then from there, this is just kind of a nice to have in order for you to always make sure that you're making progress, is kind of document and measure, right? So make sure that you're documenting Walmart issues. This is going to be very helpful if you want to try and fight OTIF fines. And then also you want to make sure that you're always reviewing progress. So are the changes that you're making helping or hurting your OTIF scores, and therefore the number of fines that you're receiving? So just always be aware. So really quickly, wanted to call out to you guys, this is also on the Retail Link OTIF app, where you can actually kind of see a zoomed out understanding of like what your score is. So you guys should see a waterfall type chart within the OTIF app. And you'll see here basically not in full. And this is, for whatever time period that you've chosen. This is, saying, hey, 18% of the cases that were ordered within this time period were on time and in full. Great job. But 22% of them were not in full, and so on and so forth. So you guys will see here kind of this lighter tealish color as supplier accountability. So these are the scores that you'll need to be paying attention to. These are the ones you could get fined on. Anything in dark blue is Walmart's accountability. So nice to know, but wouldn't worry too much about that. And And then also, again, kind of zoomed out, how do you spot trends in your OTIF metrics? So you should be able to see this information within your OTIF app on Retail Link, kind of understand over time, are things going up the way they should be, or are they going down? And now we need to be paying attention and try to figure out, where the breakdown is happening. All right. Okay. So wanted to get to the fun part, because this is always people like, that's all great, but tell me how to find OTIF fines. So yeah, wanted to kind of talk to you guys about how you can dispute OTIF chargebacks if they do come up. So one thing that we kind of wanted to throw out there, and we always, again, try to level set as much as we can, is that Walmart's official stance on OTIF disputes right now is that they are not disputable. So these are fines that come in the form of accounts receivable fees, like we talked about earlier, and they're invoiced to the supplier monthly under Code 99 OTIF. So again, here's kind of where the nuance is, and we talked about this a little bit earlier on in the webinar. They cannot be disputed once they are invoiced. So once Walmart says, yes, I've looked at the data, I'm going to hit you with a fine, I'm going to send you an invoice. Once that happens, almost impossible to approve or to try and fight. You have to basically get approval from like 3 levels of Walmart management to get that to happen. Kind of the key and the nuance in how you can avoid this situation is if you have an OTIF projected fine. So again, you can kind of see that. You can go to your buyer and say, hey, I have a projected fine for XYZ month. I don't think this is valid because blah, blah, blah. And I need you to help me waive that. If they waive it and agree to it, then essentially what that means is they've waived the fine. You're not going to get invoiced for it. Ergo, you have nothing to dispute. So a lot of the disputing really kind of happens beforehand. So one other thing that I wanted to point out to you guys as well, as far as timing and cadence goes. So Walmart's OTIF fines are assessed on a monthly basis. And this is really, really important to know, because we work with a lot of teams that start on the deduction side and then add OTIF as like an additional responsibility. And with Walmart deductions, you actually have a 2-year statute of limitations. So you can go back 2 years, fight it, A+. OTIF, you have 1 month, and really less than that. So they assess the fines on a monthly basis. And essentially what they do is, and OTIF is always about 2 weeks behind. So I think we're in week 8 right now. So now they're looking at week 6 fines. And essentially what happens is Walmart will say, hey, we're in March now. I had to check that. We're in March now. So it's fine, guys. So they'll say, okay, we've just closed the February fines. So, hey, everything that should have been received in February hopefully has been received. And they give you that 2-week grace period because, they know there's a lot of moving pieces and sometimes trucks get stuck in the yard and things like that. So they would have closed, I think they closed February last week. And so essentially, they say, okay, you have from, I'm making a date up, but let's say February or March 15th when we closed February. And then they will then actually invoice the OTIF fines at the end of the month. And I think for this month, it's March 28th. So essentially you have from March 15th when they closed February through March 28th when they invoiced to actually go and get these fines waived. And that is the scary part. And that is what trips a lot of suppliers up, because you really have 2 weeks to, number one, because you can't really do anything until the month is closed, right? Because numbers are always changing. So number one, you have to find out what your score is. Number 2, you have to find out which POs are affected. Number 3, you have to find out whether that's valid or invalid, because maybe it's Walmart's fault. And then from there, once you determine which POs are invalid, then you have to go get proof documentation, right? You get to say, no, here's my BOL, here's my POD, we did ship it, so on and so forth. And then once you have all of that information, then you have to reach out to your buyer to even kickstart that conversation. And we all know how responsive buyers are. So it's tough. It's tough for a lot of suppliers. And you really have to be paying attention to OTIF weekly in order to have any sort of head start to be able to kind of identify, research, find proof, and dispute within that 2-week period. So I always like to throw that out there, caution you guys with that, because you don't have time. It's, again, not like deductions where you can just wait and get back to it at a later time. you have to be looking at OTIF at the very least monthly. Most of our teams are looking at it weekly. So wanted to throw that out there. I really sound like the harbinger of doom this webinar. I'm sorry. It's not, I'm sorry. But we like to stress the importance because we never want you guys to be caught off guard.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. The doom is necessary. So.
Okay. Okay, cool. So wanted to give you guys a couple of examples of when you can dispute situations or OTIF fines. So the first one is around education. So you can ask your buyer for an OTIF kind of waiver based on a lack of understanding or exception handling. Caveat with this one is that you really only want to use this as an excuse, like if you're new to Walmart and really this is kind of your one-time get out of jail free card. So, you know, you can say, hey, we're brand new to Walmart. We did not know that there were these expectations. You know, we're asking you, buyer, for a one-time waiver of that. And usually, you know, buyers are, you know, they're people too, and usually they'll be pretty understanding of that, and they'll be willing to work with you. But again, this is kind of a one-time thing. You can't go back to them next month and be like, thanks for the waiver. We haven't learned anything. Please waive it again. So, you know, be kind of cognizant of how you're using these waiver requests. Another thing here is Walmart issues. So as you guys can kind of see here, documentation is key. We've got a team member here at SupplyFi that always says, like, going to Walmart is like going to court, which is really true. You want to make sure that you have your documentation and your ducks in order. If you are going to Walmart, I mean, you know, this kind of makes sense, right? If you guys are going to Walmart to say, you need to waive this fine and it's your fault and this is why you should waive it, you need to make sure that you are buttoned up. Right. So, hey, you know, it was, you guys ordered way too much product, and here's your original commitment letter. So this is why we weren't able to ship this much, or any sort of, you know, carrier issues, weather related issues, things like that. I know, for example, last week, there was a big fire at the Walmart, at a Walmart fulfillment center, I think in Indiana. And so Walmart actually told suppliers, hey, these are the list of POs that are being canceled. So make sure that you're aware of that. If you get an OTIF fine for it, ask them to waive it. And this is why. So documentation is key. Make sure you have all of your proof. And kind of a pro tip for this one too, and really for all of them, but for this one especially, is you want to be as proactive as possible with your Walmart buyer. So we actually had kind of we had a webinar with one of our, you know, buyer contacts at Walmart. And she told us, like, you know, if the first time I'm hearing from you for that month about OTIF is you asking for an OTIF fine waiver, we're already starting on the wrong foot. Like, if you know you're going to have issues, or if Walmart is having issues, you need to be proactively communicating this with Walmart, even if they don't respond to you. You know, at least once a week, hey, buyer, we wanted you to be aware of ABC. It's going to cause an impact to DEF, and therefore we may need your support later on in the month. At the very least, they, you know, are in the right mindset. So when you do go to them at the end of the month, they're like, okay, I knew this was coming. They let me know ahead of time. I was able to plan accordingly. Let's go ahead and waive it. If, you know, you try to come to them at the end of the month and say, hey, you haven't heard from me in 4 weeks, but please waive this 5-figure fine, going to be a much harder sell, as you guys can imagine. And then kind of the last thing is extenuating circumstances. So, you know, weather or unforeseeable significant events. So like, for example, we had a supplier that had a situation where they're like, cargo ship literally sank. And so, you know, they're like, I literally could not have done anything more about that. And so they worked with their buyer on that. But again, making sure that you have proof documentation of, hey, this is what happened and this is why. One thing that we get a lot of questions on is, hey, is Walmart offering any OTIF fine relief because of COVID? So again, if you guys are kind of newer to Walmart, you may not have known this, but in 2020, Walmart actually did offer a fine relief, I think from March of 2020 through October of 2020, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, or September. And essentially, yes, they did not, they did not really levy fines against the suppliers. But ever since then, Walmart has essentially said, and they actually said this in the supplier growth forum as well. They said, we're trying to get back to normal as soon as possible. So, at this point, I don't really foresee Walmart kind of extending any OTIF fine relief because of COVID. Of course, things are changing all the time in this environment. But for right now, as of today, I'm not really seeing any potential for that. Okay, so really quickly, kind of want to walk you guys through the best practices of disputing OTIF chargebacks. And I think that might be all we've got with our webinar today. But as I kind of mentioned, make sure that you're communicating issues with the Walmart team as they come up. Remember, as our buyer friend said, you reaching out to them about an OTIF fine waiver should not be the first time you're emailing them about it that month. Document. Always have your proof documentation before you go to Walmart, especially if you're going to try and put something on them. As of right now, your buyer is going to be your primary contact. So your buyer is the only one that has the authority to actually agree to fine waivers. So your RM or your SSM, your replenishment manager or your supplier solutions manager, they can be helpful, especially because usually most suppliers have more communication with their replenishment team than their buying team. So if you're actively communicating with your replenishment manager, they can also advocate for you. But essentially your buyer is going to be the only one that can actually approve it. So when you are sending requests in, they go to the buyer. As you guys can imagine, the goal is to prevent the need to dispute OTIF, not to rely on OTIF disputing. So always, be paying attention to your OTIF scores and tweaking that. Fighting them is a pain. So wherever you can, try and prevent the need to do it. You want to dispute before fines are issued. Like we talked about, once they're issued, almost impossible to get them reversed. So be aware of that. OTIF fines are issued around 5 weeks after the month end, and OTIF data is always about 1 to 2 weeks behind. So we actually have an OTIF calendar that we can share out with you guys, or I believe, Melody, can they go to calendar.supplypack.com to see this information? Sweet. Yeah.
I will put that in the link.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. And again, that 3-week time period that I talked about. So you want to be looking at OTIF at the very least monthly, at the very least, if you can, weekly, and then you only have that 2 to 3 week period to actually go in and fight. So be aware, be vigilant, be ready. Okay, so we're at 12:52, a couple of minutes over, I apologize, but wanted to share with you guys an OTIF resource. This is available through Supplier Wiki. It covers a lot of what we talked about today. So if you guys are curious and want to be able to see a deep dive even further into some light bedtime reading, you can check out our ultimate guide to OTIF, as well as our OTIF courses on Supplier Wiki.
Yes. And then one thing we wanted to offer for everyone who attended today is a OTIF impact analysis. So if you want to take some of these insights that you've seen here today and share it with your team, as well as actually with your data, it will have like screenshots of your data showing how OTIF is impacting your business. We do have a PDF that we will happily do for you guys. And we can even set up a 1 hour time with someone, probably Stacy, that will actually be going over this document with you guys. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out to us or reply to the email that we will be sending pretty much immediately after this.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, do we have any questions? I haven't seen any come through, which is a shocker because I feel like with OTIF, we already always have so many.
I'm going to say we did a good job with the content, Melody.
The content just
talked their head off. They're like, let's not talk about OTIF anymore, please.
Awesome. Well, if we don't have any questions, I guess we can go ahead and jump into, and here you can actually contact us. So this is our emails, our actual real emails. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We would love to talk to you guys. We always love either jumping on a call with you guys or just conversing over email. And if you're interested, please check out our website. So it's just supplypike.com. You can actually book some time directly on our calendars from there. It's just going to be at the top. It's going going to say scheduled demo, but if you book some time and just put in the notes that if there's a certain thing that you want to talk about during that meeting. Perfect.
Righty.
Well, let's jump into OTIF radar. So if you guys are curious on what we do here at Supply Pike, happy to.
Awesome. Yeah, so really quickly, guys, kind of like Melody mentioned, we just want to give you guys a super quick 5-minute overview of what our take on OTIF is. As I kind of mentioned and alluded to a little bit in the webinar, there is a lot, there's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot to know. And that cadence, like I mentioned, it happens really fast. And so for a lot of our teams, in order for you to really kind of get the full picture of your OTIF score, most of our teams actually have to go into like 6 different apps in Retail Link. So one thing I do always like to kind of throw out there for you guys, can you get all of this information, not all of it, but can you get a lot of good information out of Retail Link? Yes. It's just extremely manual, very tedious. And if you guys are doing business with Walmart, then I don't need to kind of wax poetic on how great Retail Link is. So kind of the beauty of our apps, and kind of you'll see this with OTIF Radar as well, is we cut out a lot of that manual work for you. So rather than you having to go into 6 different apps every week, download a bunch of reports and stitch them together in, you know, giant spreadsheets, we do all the work for you. All of this data lives on the cloud. You can access it whenever you want. It is live. And so you're always looking at the exact same data that Walmart is looking at. But anyway, so really quickly, just to kind of give you guys high level overview. So we are able to show you guys, you know, your high level information on our dashboard. As you guys can see, one of the cool things about Supply Pike is we will actually store your data indefinitely. So if you guys come on with us, we'll kind of go back that 13 weeks that I talked about. And then from then on, we'll just continue to stack data on top of that, which is really cool. So imagine that you'll be able to do quarter over quarter comparisons, year over year comparisons, and actually know like, hey, am I doing better or am I not? We can also show you kind of your finds over time. So, hey, are the tweaks that I'm putting into practice with my supply chain actually kind of driving value for me? Other things that we do, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is, so remember I talked about the only things that you can do is find the projected finds. So we actually pull this data out automatically for you. So you don't have to go in and say like, okay, what was my accountability? How many cases did I ship? And what am I actually, you know, what's my potential exposure? We do all of that work for you. And then this, I think, is really where the cool part comes in, is we have a lot of business logic actually built into the app. So again, because we're pulling from like 6 different places, we can actually identify for you which of those POs are potentially invalid. So again, cutting out a lot of that research and manual work where you have to go in line by line by line. We've done all of that for you and said, hey, out of this potential $30,000 fine, 1,800 of it is probably invalid. So you can actually kind of click into those purchase orders. And again, we'll show you all of that information. And actually, let me move my Zoom bar a little bit. There we go. And, you know, again, we're pulling all of this data for you where you don't have to worry about that. Kind of a cool thing as well, and I mentioned, you know, you need to be able to go to your buyer with documentation, is we can actually put together dispute documents for you. So right now, if you guys were to do this manually, again, possible, but you'd have to go in, identify those POs that were invalid, then probably go into your carrier portals and pull all those BOLs or all those PODs for those relevant POs. With OTIF Radar, you can kind of select all, hit create dispute documents, and it will actually pull all of that information together for you into a neat little Excel file, including your shipping documentation, because we can actually integrate with your carriers and your 3PLs, and then it'll automatically, you can download that, and then you can take that and then ship that off to your Walmart buyer. So we've actually helped our teams to dispute like hundreds of thousands of dollars and win on OTIF fines. So that's pretty cool. Last little bit that I just wanted to show you guys really quickly is just how in-depth you could get with the data. So OTIF radar, I love because you can have this 10,000 foot view, or you can go like really, 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 really into the weeds. But a great example, if you guys are prepaid, let's just say, and you use multiple carriers. So we can give you your OTIF score from like different viewpoints. So you can see your top performing departments or destinations or vendor numbers, items, etc. But we have a lot of teams, for example, utilize this for carrier data. So we'll actually break out your carrier performance for you on whatever time frame that you've selected. So kind of the cool part of this is number one, you're keeping your carriers accountable, right? And then number two, we've actually had a lot of teams utilize this data to either pass on fines to their carriers or even negotiate better rates with their carriers. So this is all kind of dummy data, of course, but a great example of this is being able to say, hey, CH Robinson, dummy data, not real data, but hey, CH Robinson, you know, I know for a fact that I had all of my product ready for you when you came and picked it up, but, you know, because you guys delivered things not on time, you know, you cost me $22,000. I either need you to take on that fine because it was not my fault, or we need to negotiate a better rate, or I may even just consider switching carriers altogether. So yeah, we're able to kind of, again, give you visibility, help you to fight OTIF fines. And then when you want to start root causing and tweaking and bettering your supply chain, we give you all of that data as well. All right, I think that's all I've got, Melody.
Great job. Yeah. Thank you so much for showing us that demo and talking about OTIF and like how to be in full. I think that's really important for people to understand. So hopefully this was beneficial to everyone. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much for attending. If this is your first time or you've been to a million of these, we always love seeing you. And I hope if it's your first time that you'll come back and watch some more of these with us. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. And yeah, we'll hopefully see you later.
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.